welcome back. We start from Afghanistan, where President Ashraf Ghani is poised to win a second 5-year term in the office. His main opponent and the country's chief executive, Abdullah, has secured just under 40% of the votes. The Independent Election Commission's preliminary results show Ghani leading with 50.6% of votes. The commission said it had carried out its duty and with honesty and responsibility. Abdullah's campaign said it will contest the results, while Gulbuddin Hikmatyar's team had rejected the results before today's notice. Poll results were originally due on 19th October but were repeatedly delayed amid technical issues and allegations of fraud. Moving on to India, where 17 people have been killed in Uttar Pradesh in violent protests against the controversial Citizenship Act. This brings the death toll to 25 in over a week of unrest sparked by the contentious law which only grants nationality to non-Muslim immigrants. The Indian government has shut down the internet in Delhi, Lucknow, Kanpur, Meerut and 18 other cities of UP. In Delhi, police arrested 40 people, including 8 minors, from a massive protest outside Jama Masjid. Meanwhile, after West Bengal, the Indian states of Kerala and Bihar have opposed the new law and put it on hold. The states have cited apprehension among the general public about its consequences. Women are playing a central role in the ongoing protest movement against India's new citizenship law, which demonstrators say is in violation of India's secular constitution. Women from all walks of life, from students to housewives, have taken to the streets in a rare show of public anger against the BJP government. More in this report.
Anam Hussain and Tanya Tariq have spent the last week preparing placards for protest against India's new Citizenship Amendment Act. Both are students of New Delhi's Jamia Millia Islamia University and joined the demonstrations when they learned police had raided their college's library.
When we got the news that it's happening inside the reading room, we understood that it could have been us also over there who would have been affected by it. So after 15, lot of students, lot of people from Jamia actually came out on the streets to protest.
The police attack on Jamia Millia Islamia left 200 students injured. But Tanya Tariq says she isn't scared of the government or the police brutality.
We have become more powerful. Rather than, getting into our houses and saying, no, we can't go outside because so much so is happening. The whole India, rather the world is with us, okay? And I believe that it should not stop unless and until the government should take back this.
25 people have been killed since a protest started, with the most deaths occurring in Uttar Pradesh, a BJP stronghold.
Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India could resort to a false flag operation to divert the world's attention from its internal turmoil. He was referring to the ongoing protests in India against the controversial citizenship law. In a statement, Qureshi urges the international community to take notice of India's belligerence threatening peace in the region. He said all Indian minorities, particularly Muslims, are protesting against the Discriminatory Citizenship Act. The foreign minister said there are protests against the bill even in the US and Canada. He said Indian forces resorted to unprovoked firing at the line of control, but they were given a befitting response by the Pakistan Army. In India, a 70-year-old Kashmiri political detainee has died in custody at a jail in Rajasthan. This is the first death of a political prisoner outside occupied Kashmir since India stripped the region of its autonomy on the 5th of August and later imposed a curfew and communications blackout. Occupied Kashmir's former Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti says the Indian government is responsible for his death and must be held accountable. Pakistan's Foreign Office says media reports about changes in visa policy for residents of Indian-occupied Kashmir are incorrect. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the Pakistan High Commission continues to issue visas to residents of the valley. It said visas are being issued in accordance with the policy of the government and related bilateral agreements between Pakistan and India. It further said the High Commission for Pakistan is considering the post-August 5th humanitarian situation in the valley while deciding on visa applications. The High Commission is facilitating as many as possible residents who fulfill the visa requirements. Now from the Middle East. In Syria, government forces seized dozens of towns and villages from rebels in the country's northeast following days of violent clashes. But the uptick in violence is fueling an exodus as people flee Idlib. The United Nations says tens of thousands of people have fled to the Turkish border in recent days. Turkey currently hosts over 3.5 million Syrian refugees, the largest refugee population in the world. A war monitor said 170 combatants have been killed since Thursday. Idlib is the last major stronghold of rebels fighting government forces since 2015. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says, if necessary, Turkey will increase its military support to Libya's internationally recognized government. In a statement, Erdogan says Ankara will evaluate all its options from the ground, air, and sea. He says Turkey will not turn back from its agreements with Libya. Turkey backs Libya's internationally recognized government, led by Fayez al-Sarraj, and the two sides signed a security agreement last month. Earlier, Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army claimed to have seized a Turkish ship to search and verify its cargo. The LNA said the Grenada-flagged ship was taken to Ras al-Hilal's port near the eastern city of Derna.
Recently, we have provided significant support to legitimate Libyan government. If necessary, we will increase the military aspect of our support to Libya and evaluate all our options from the ground, air, and sea.
Now from Europe, Greece's Foreign Minister Nikos Dendias has met the head of Libya's parallel eastern government, Abdullah al-Sani, in Benghazi. The visit comes amid tensions with Turkey following Ankara's recent maritime agreement with Tripoli's unity government. Dendias also met Libya's eastern government Foreign Minister Abdul Hadi Lahwij. Athens says the deal between Ankara and GNA violates international maritime law and the sovereign rights of Greece and other countries. Libya is split between bitterly opposed administrations in the east and west. In Somalia, a suicide car bomb attack has killed 7 people and wounded dozens in the north-central town of Galkayo. The Somali military said the bomb went off outside a hotel where senior military officials were staying. It said the driver had failed to enter the hotel compound and instead hit a military pickup parked outside as a barrier. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack yet. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has briefed the outcome of his talks with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani to US President Donald Trump. The White House says Trump spoke over the phone with Abe about developments related to North Korea, Iran, and trade. Abe told Trump that Japan will continue diplomatic efforts to ease tensions in the Middle East. He said Tokyo wants to urge North Korea to work for denuclearization through peaceful dialogue. The two sides agreed to continue close communication and coordination in light of recent threats issued by Pyongyang. The phone conversation lasted about 75 minutes and came a day after Abe held talks with Rouhani in Tokyo. Russia says US President Donald Trump wants to overcome problems in bilateral relations. In an interview, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Trump sent a letter about the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty to President Vladimir Putin. Lavrov said Trump sent the letter in response to Moscow's offer to suspend the development of missiles banned by the INF Treaty. The US formally left the INF Treaty with Russia in August after accusing Moscow of violating the treaty. The Kremlin has denied the accusations. Lavrov also said Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky wants to improve relations with Russia, but some forces in Kiev are blocking him. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the UK hopes to have better relations with Russia. In an interview, Johnson said London expects to improve commercial relations and enhance trade with Moscow. Johnson is on a one-day visit to Estonia to meet with the British soldiers serving in the Baltic country. Praising NATO, he said it has been the most successful military alliance of the past 5 centuries and has a great future. He also said the country wants to move past Brexit.
What everybody wants to do is put Brexit behind us on January the 31st, then move on. And there's a lot of goodwill, a lot of energy now about building the new deep and special partnership, and that's what we're going to do.
We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Croatians are voting today for a new president just days before the country takes over the European Union presidency for the first time. 11 candidates are running in the election, but opinion polls suggest a tight three-way race. Country's first female president, Kolinda Grabar, is running for a second term. She faces a challenge from right-wing folk singer turned politician Miroslav Skoro and former leftist Prime Minister Zoran Milanovic. Croatia's president is the ceremonial head of the state, as the prime minister holds the majority of executive powers. Uzbekistan is heading to the polls today in its first parliamentary election under reformist president Shavkat Mirziyoyev. 150 seats in the lower house are up for grabs, where no party has ever achieved a majority. 20 million people are eligible to vote in Central Asia's most populous country, which is home to 33 million people. The lower house has a long-earned rubber stamp reputation, as all 5 parties competing support the president. Mirziyoyev replaced long-standing president Islam Karimov in 2016 and reversed many of his authoritarian measures. In Cuba, Manuel Marrero Cruz has been named the country's first prime minister in 43 years. President Miguel Diaz-Canel appointed Marrero to the post, scrapped in 1976 by the revolutionary leader Fidel Castro. The position was reinstated under a new constitution passed earlier this year. Marrero's appointment as head of the government is part of decentralization process and generational change from the revolutionary old guard. He has been serving as tourism minister for 15 years. The position of prime minister was last held by Fidel Castro in 1976. Moving on to the Honduras, where 18 inmates have been killed while 16 are injured in clashes at a jail in the northern port town of Tela. The National Penitentiary Institute said 17 victims died at the facility, while another one died in the hospital. The prison spokesperson said several inmates were armed with guns that slowed down the operation. Security officials seized 5 9mm guns and ammunition from the inmates. Honduras has recently seen a spike in prison killings. Earlier on Tuesday, President Juan Orlando Hernandez ordered the army to take over the country's 27 prisons. In the U.S., 6 people have died and 13 others were injured in a fire at a building in downtown Las Vegas. Fire officials said the blaze displaced over 35 people. Authorities say the accidental fire started around a stove in the apartment's first floor. Officials say the damage is currently estimated at $475,000. Las Vegas authorities are calling it the deadliest fire in the city's history. A scorching heat wave has intensified the bushfires ravaging Australia. Temperatures are expected to peak at 47 degrees Celsius in New South Wales and West Sydney. Fire department officials said an expected change in winds would aggravate the already catastrophic conditions. Officials say only rain can help them control the onslaught of bushfires. Sydney is shrouded in toxic smoke as blazes flared just 130 kilometers from the country's largest city. Fires have burned over 7 million hectares of land, killing 10 people and destroying over 800 homes. In Lebanon, the municipality of Cheka has lightened a Christmas tree made entirely of plastic bottles. The 28 meters high Christmas tree is expected to win the Guinness World Record for being the largest model made from plastic bottles.
Caroline Shaptini and members of her community used over 120,000 plastic bottles to build the Christmas tree. They created a social media hashtag for people to donate them bottles instead of throwing them away. It took them around 8 months to gather these empty plastic bottles.
It took 20 days to finish. You don't know how helpful the people here are. People aged 3 to 60 years old are working.
Lebanon has been witnessing a serious garbage crisis since 2015. With no effective solution to the problem, pollution leads to a rise in cancer cases among citizens. Now, this team of activists hope to send a message on the importance of recycling.
The tree that you can see here is the biggest proof that we are taking care of our environment, and we encourage everyone to do the same. We are really happy that the whole city was working together.
Once the season is over, the plastic bottles will be sent to a recycling factory.
In the South Atlantic Ocean, scientists are on a mission to find an underwater mountain called Mount Wima. It is said marine life here is flourishing after an extensive ban on fishing. This Greenpeace research mission is part of the UN Treaty to Preserve the Oceans. More about the revival of Mount Wima in this report.
They're often called sea wolves, nomads who live most of their lives on the ocean. These are the dedicated volunteers who work on board the Greenpeace ships. The seamount rises 4,600 meters from the ocean floor up to around 20 meters below the water surface. A fishing ban was put in place at Mount Wima in 2007 in the hope it would allow the marine life time to recover. And it has. Greenpeace expedition team leader and marine biologist Thilo Mak has been an activist for 20 years, but he also joins in some of the dives to get a first-hand look at the seamount.
I think this is just the perfect example of what happens if you leave nature on its own for a certain period of time. Even if it was overfished, it will replenish shortly.
Environmental victories like these are exactly the reason Barry keeps going.
If they tell me, Greenpeace tells me tomorrow that there's no more money, there's no more funds to pay me a salary, I would still keep on doing exactly what I'm doing now. No doubt about it.
Life at sea might be tough at times, but for these volunteers, conservation isn't just a job. It's a call for change and a search for meaning.
Although a Phase 1 trade deal has been agreed on, some in the U.S. toy industry fear the next phase of talks could break going forward and the threat of tariffs could return. More in this report.
This is one of the busiest weeks for American retailers as they make half of all toy sales during the winter holiday period. And now they have an extra reason to celebrate. A toy shop owner in Chicago, Scott Fridland, is pleased that tariffs aren't going up following the US-China Phase 1 trade agreement.
The tariffs obviously wouldn't have had a big effect on this year because we've already stocked through the end of the year, but where it's really would end up hurting us is the beginning of next year, January, February, March.
The nightmare for the American toy industry has been avoided for the Christmas season. They hope it stays that way.
I obviously don't want 25% tariffs, but if they're going to happen, I'd love to have certainty to say this is what's going to be happening. There's a million uncertainties. I really don't appreciate.
3/4 of their toys and games are made in China. Last year, the United States imported some $18.5 billion worth of toys from its biggest economic rival.
We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so keep watching. US President Donald Trump has said the United States and China will sign the Phase 1 trade deal soon. The deal was announced earlier this month to end the trade war between the world's two largest economies. Earlier, Trump and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping discussed the partial resolution of the trade dispute. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the pact will be signed in early January as the deal was undergoing a technical review. Addressing a conservative student summit in Florida, Trump said his tough stance with China had yielded the breakthrough in trade talks.
We also took the toughest ever action against China, and as a result, we just achieved a breakthrough on the trade deal, and we'll be signing it very shortly. They're already buying billions and billions of dollars of products, agricultural products.
West African nations have agreed to cease the use of the French franc as currency from next year. The monetary union cut some of the financial links with Paris that have underpinned the region's common currency since World War II.
The 8 members of the West African Economic and Monetary Union reached an agreement to use a new common currency called ECO. Under the new agreement, ECO will remain attached to the euro, but African nations won't have to keep 50% of their reserves in French treasury. The leaders hailed the agreement as a significant moment in Africa's history.
This Saturday, the 21st of December 2019, is a historic day for our country and the whole of West Africa. This reform represents a big step in our will to make our region an integrated and dynamic economic space and a source of prosperity.
The agreement will only affect the West African form of the currency used by Benin, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Bissau, Ivory Coast, Mali, Niger, Senegal and Togo.
Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.